Hello and welcome to the Keto Man's Club podcast.
We're glad you're here, where each week we talk about men's health and lifestyle.
We do so with the foundation of the ketogenic diet and lifestyle.
If you don't know what keto is, stick around and you'll find out.
The podcast will bring you real, honest fun.
Each week we strive to uncover the tips and tricks that you can use in your everyday life to maximize your overall health.
Find the clearest path to becoming the best version of yourself that you were meant to be.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Keto Man's Club podcast. My name is Chris. I'm one of your hosts, and this week I am joined by Jim and Alberto, as always. And we have a really interesting and a bit of a one-off episode for you guys, our listeners. And so it'll be a really good time to answer some questions that you guys have asked about a topic that Berto specifically has been learning quite a lot about. Before we get to Berto and all of that, Jim, what's new with you?
Last week, we did our first live video podcast, which kudos to you, Christopher, for pulling all the technology and making it happen. Much appreciated. Saw some nice engagement on our social media and all that good stuff and everything. And life was good. And I celebrated going into that with some barbecue. And the next day, the barbecue decided that we do not like you anymore. And so a severe case of stomach flu kicked in for about 5 days. And that whole intermittent fasting, we did a lot of that over the last few days and everything. Actually, today is the first day I've felt somewhat of an appetite and a bit normal. I don't advise going into gastroenteritis or whatever it's called when you have food poisoning and the stomach bug for ketoizing. But it did help a little bit, so I'm not going to complain. So we're surviving. That's been my week.
Yeah, sunny sides on all that. I'm glad you were concerned that it was something more severe, and I'm glad that it wasn't in the end. And you were able to track it back to its source. Hopefully, you're able to fully cook the foods.
Pink meat is never a good thing. Lesson learned.
Pink pork.
Pink pork.
Yeah. Pink steak. Oh, I'll eat it all day long.
Yeah.
Yep. So, Berto, this episode's centric around you to a degree once again, but you just had your birthday, 41st birthday.
Yep.
And it's been a bit of a good week for you in that regard. You're also wrapping up the Carnivore Keto Cut, which is our theme for today in general. But from your perspective, how's it been?
Good. I mean, overall, it was a good week. You said it was my birthday, so that went well. I leaned out a little bit. I'm sure you saw the picture.
Mm-hmm.
That went well. I got a tooth yanked out of my head yesterday, so that was probably the biggest downfall. But all things considered, that's been going really well, too, because I was on pain meds yesterday, and as of this morning, I ditched the heavy stuff, and I'm just taking the super giant ibuprofen horse pills, and those seem to be working. So back to work tomorrow.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Non-painful tooth extractions is a very good thing. For sure. So that's great. So let's hit in towards it. We'll get into our topic fully here in a minute, but let's circle back to our shout outs real quick. Berto, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. This is a guy who, I approved his membership today, actually. And this was from a different group. There's a dad's fitness group that I'm in. I post on occasionally. And for a while, I was that crazy, weird keto guy there. But after a while, I just keep posting and posting. They're like, oh, this guy's kind of serious. He actually it reached out to me and just started asking me questions. And then it led to him revealing that he's been keto for a year and he's stalled out and working out 4 times a week. And so I obviously gave him a link to the group. And he messaged me back saying he answered the questions. So I let him in. But his name is Matt Brzezinski. He did in the new members, Jim's new members welcome. He added, I'm sorry, not that. It was a Transformation Tuesday. He added his picture and he's super excited to be in the group. Thanked me like 100 times and is hoping to get himself a little more dialed in. And we're gonna get him straightened out. Should be good.
Absolutely. Always ways to tweak, improve, dig a little deeper. That's true if you're 6 months in or like me, 3.5 years in. There's always ways to tweak and improve. Jim, what's your pick?
I have a group shout out, so to speak, to the gents who have started posting up photos of their new Steaks Are Greater Than Shakes and TKMC photos. So you guys did the finishing touches and packaging on the shirts, which I greatly appreciate. Special shout out to Ant, who is our graphics man and screen printer and all that good stuff. They look awesome. I have seen some great photos just in the last 24 hours or so the guys that have posted up their pics and everything, and looking forward to more of those. Kudos to all the gents who jumped on board, got themselves a shirt or two or a sticker. Berto, thank you for doing those as well. And yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. Those
Yeah,
stickers.
well, this is out there. A couple of guys have reached out saying that the stickers are being a little finicky and hard, which I knew might have been a problem when these things take extreme temperatures, usually in shipping. Sometimes it doesn't work well for them. But I do have a different backing material, so if you are having issues with the stickers, or if you burn through all the stickers you ordered and didn't quite get one to lay out, just reach out to me. I will gladly cut more stickers and try this other backing and see if we have better luck that way.
Yeah, you had given me one of the first ones that you cut, and I just couldn't get it to stick to my bottle for nothing. So, or at least not without coming along or wrinkling and all that type of stuff. Yeah,
no big deal. We'll get it sorted out. Like I said, I got another backing material I can play with, and I will definitely do a bunch of testing on it.
Cool.
So if you need more, just hit me up. We'll take care of it.
Sure. Very cool. Yeah, the stickers are great. They're really not stickers. They're vinyl. Yeah. So they really are the type that are made to stick on your car and stay there regardless of wet and rain and all that type of stuff. They're heavy duty. They're good stuff. My shout out for the week is going to Brandon Caraway. He posted a picture. He's been keto for about 7 months, and you can tell he's getting some really great results. But the thing that I really liked about his post was he threw in there a last line: if anyone can relate to my story, drop relate in the comments. And it one of those things where he's trying to connect with folks and see who else is involved, and I think or experiencing the same, and encouraging conversation, which is part of what we like to see. So wanted to give a shout out for that. And his results are great, but his desire for community and connecting with community was even better. That's most of the business. Now, for our listeners, a quick reminder: all of the links to the ways that you can connect with us are on our website, theketomansclub.com. And if you can, take a moment or two and leave a review, leave a comment on the Facebook page, wherever and whatever you can do to get the word out and share a little bit about us and into the world will help the algorithm see more of us and put us in front of more people. This is a Q&A episode. We're going to try and answer as many questions as we can, but normally we're sharing the stories of people who have been there, done that. And I think there's a lot of power to that. And if nothing else, it helps people realize that they too can improve and overcome. And that message is very important to get out. And so we want to get that out in front of as many people as we possibly can. So theketomansclub.com is a great way to connect with us. You can also call and leave us a voicemail. I'm not going to play it right now, but I actually got a voicemail from one of our newer members. He's one of the ones that's fired through all 64 of the podcast episodes in apparently a binge session, as he's been doing 75 hard walks each night. And he's he left a Berto style voice message while he was on one of those walks. And you can leave a voicemail for us at 512-518-6161. And we would look forward to hearing from you, literally. And then also you can email us at ketomansclubpodcast@gmail.com. So we put out a call for questions regarding the carnivore keto cut that Berto's been going through these last few weeks and is starting to get to the end of. Let's talk generalities, the basic experience real quick and things like that. And then we'll get into the actual questions that you, our listeners, and the community members responded with. So Berto, tell us a little bit about what the experience has been like.
It's been very interesting, very eye-opening. I've done cuts in the past and just not quite so structured. I did one last year, worked out real well for me, but it was just kind of me winging it. So this year I decided to buy a program, found a more structured approach, and it was definitely eye-opening, a lot more difficult than I anticipated. And I wasn't like prepping for a bodybuilding competition or anything, because if I was, the calories would continue to drop and drop. I think Jonathan Shane had mentioned that he was down to 1,600 a day as he was getting closer to what ended up being his photo shoot because it got canceled. Mm-hmm. But I was nowhere near that. I got down to 2,180 as my low. But for 2,180, for the sake of trying it, is really low for me, uncomfortably low. And when you force yourself to stick to it, you learn about yourself. The grind, when you're grinding hard and when you're struggling is when you dig deep and you find the breaking points and where you're struggling. And I was able to find a few of those. So it was definitely interesting and worth it for sure. It's a 4-week cut, 2 weeks at your lowest amount. And I'm on my second week now. And then next week, I'll start to reverse, which is also very important because then you slowly add calories back in week by week. Because what I want to do is just eat like a pig on Sunday when this thing is over. But that's what everybody wants to do. So that's where the reverse diet comes in very handy. Because if I just start eating like crazy, then everything I've worked for and as lean as I got will pretty much, from what I understand, just go straight out the window.
Yeah.
And we definitely don't want that. You want to hang on to what you got for a minute, and then for me, it's obviously as the calories taper back up, I'll have I should, in theory, have really good control of where I find a sweet spot of getting my gym performance to creep back up, but still being able to hang on to as much of this lean as possible and try to find a happy medium in there instead of what I was doing before. So in a sense, for me, it was a way of truing things up. Like you would take your car in for a tune-up just to make sure everything was up to snuff before a long road trip. This is how I took this cut on, just to like reevaluate, trim the fat, so to speak, and to true things up.
Yep. Trim the fat. Funny. Yeah. So it's been fun getting to watch you on this from my side of things, just because I have seen the transformation in the pictures, or like when you were here at the house, and you definitely have. You've leaned out, and it's not like you even had that high of a body fat percentage to start with. You've been reasonably lean for a while, and so you've just gotten that added definition, and while you are probably quite a bit smaller than maybe you had been previously, you just have much more definition for the muscles that you have maintained, because that's the other wonderful thing about being on a ketogenic diet, is that it's very muscle sparing. So you can absolutely build the muscle and whatnot. And then you go into a cut. And normally what people fear whenever they're doing a cut is that they end up fearing that they're going to lose the gains that they've had over their build or their bulking period and things like that. But with keto, that shouldn't happen, because you shouldn't see much in the way of glyconeogenesis that would end up pulling or extracting glycogen from your protein stores, because you're not going into a protein deficit. Talk a little bit about the macros, and that goes along with some of these questions here. How are they structured? Why are they structured? Things like that.
Absolutely. You're starting off good when, like, I've known Danny Vega for a while. This is his program. So we'll get into the program here in a second, but I've known him for a while. And I messaged him, let him know I bought it. I paid for it. I'm like, hey, I'm going to buy this thing. I'm going to pay for it. And that's why, I'm kind of curious to see what's going to happen. And he immediately texted me right back saying, he's like, don't use the spreadsheet. I got to custom write your macros. He's like, you're one of the few that are actually eating enough to start with. So I was ready to start off at a good point there. But it's basically a spreadsheet. It's his spreadsheet. Obviously, it's proprietary to the program. Mm-hmm. And the spreadsheet gives you your starting macros. And then week 1, you're pretty much already starting off at a pretty good sized deficit. I think it was 300 or 400 calories. I'm not sure. And then it just tapers down from there till you get to your low, your quote unquote low, whatever that may be for you based on your height and weight and, lean body mass. And every week, what I really liked about this is the protein stayed static the entire time. And you tapered back the fat from, I'm going to call it higher fat to high fat. Because even at my leanest, which is now my lowest calories, which are now in grams, I'm still 1-to-1 fat and protein, which by percentage ends up still being upwards of 67 to 70% fat. So it's still a very fat heavy ketogenic diet by percentage. And no, that's where I found it most interesting, because a lot of these guys that go on these cuts, and I'm not saying it doesn't work, but they always pull a lot from fat and their fat gets really low. And mine is as low as it's ever been, but still eating 165 grams of fat a day. It's not like protein sparing modified fast low. It's still adequate amount of fat to keep you healthy. And I could most definitely survive on these macros if I chose to. Just that it gets hard with the activity level.
So to follow up with that, the point that I was making or digging for, I was setting you up for, and you did a good job putting right in the hoop. The idea of this particular cut specifically doesn't reduce or cut back on your protein. You start at an adequate amount of protein intake. You cut out every carb that you possibly can because it's a carnivore cut. And then you just manipulate the fat. I think that's an important thing to understand and know. And with that, now each cut, depending on who it is that's setting up, is going to be different. And so you need to follow whoever it is that you choose to follow and try to dig into their why on some of that, and make sure. Now, Danny does a good job in the documentation. I've seen the keto cut. Or the Keto Cut documentation because I was given it because I work with Danny. So he's, I'm not going to make you pay me whenever I'm just going to pay you back. He gave it to me. So I've got the documentation. It's well written and he explains and goes into a lot of the science. And that's really helpful for sure.
And to that point, Chris, like you were saying, there's no shortage of coaches out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's no shortage of styles out there. So that kind of just proves your point. Like, find the coach, the style that resonates with you the most, that you feel most comfortable with, that has the macros that you think are going to work the best for you. You got to be mentally all in.
Mm-hmm.
So find that coach that's gonna jive with your ideas and with the way you feel and with where your brain's at, and go with that guy. Chances are all the big names out there and what the results are going to be, you just got to be willing to be 100% all in mentally. And in that context, you're better off picking a quote unquote coach. And by coach, like, he didn't coach me. He just gave me, I followed his program, but pick who you like and go all in with that, man. You got to be mentally all in. So I think it's less about which direction you decide to go and more about which one you're more mentally prepared to stick to.
So talking about that concept, the different cuts and everything that you have done, was there a different mindset with this one going into it? Did you anticipate a different challenge than what you've experienced with other cuts that you've done before? How, obviously the macros and things were different, but did you do other things to prepare?
I was completely unprepared for this. I mean, I thought I was ready for it, but I've never done anything like it before as far as the structure involved. Pretty much in concept, someone telling me this is what you're going to eat. Whereas before I'd be like, I'm a little extra hungry. Well, whatever. I'm still in a deficit. I'll just add a little bit of this at the end of the day. No big deal. Whereas here, it's like, if you're going to stick to it, my macros were handed to me, and this is what you stick to. These are the calories you stick to. This is the fat. This is the protein. Obviously, it was as little carbs as humanly possible. And so there's nights where you're just ravenously hungry, and the food's in front of you, and you've got to make the decision, and you've got to make the conscious decision that you're going to have to stop eating because you've hit your numbers. And that part I was definitely not prepared for because I'm just not used to it. So there was definitely a lot of mindset, a lot of challenges. And like I stated last week, all the keto foods are still in my pantry. All the regular stuff I would normally eat still in my pantry. All the cheese sticks are still in the fridge. And I just, it was not in the program, so I couldn't eat it. And when you're starving and you're staring at, the tub full of cheese sticks that your kids munch on, and the bags of cashews and the bags of pecans and the bags of pumpkin seeds that you would normally have no problem getting a handful, throwing a handful back. It's not part of the program. I could just as easily have reached my hand there and taken a handful of those and been happy, but I didn't, because that's not what I paid for. I got to stick with it. So the mind games are real, and it only got harder the farther I got along and as the calories got lower. And knowing that all that food was still there and having to pretend that the Rebel ice cream isn't in the freezer because my wife eats it, and all the snacks that are still there. So it was a challenge. It was a challenge for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll end up hearing your quote final results after this week is over, and whenever you weigh yourself at the gym, since your home scale took a crap and you're having his smart scale won't connect to his phone anymore because the app went out, and so it won't even give him a reading without the phone. That's like the dumbest smart
it's the most
device.
Asinine thing I've ever seen.
At least my scale, even though it gives like a barcode that my phone can scan to log the readings, at least it's dumb enough that it gives me the readings whether I have my phone on me or not.
It was very polite. Like, you'd step on it and it would say, please connect your phone, but there's no app on your phone because they stopped supporting it. So but someone had to write that in. Like, why couldn't you just let the scale be a scale? Like, I don't need a data. I just want to know how much I weigh. But no, it didn't do that either. So blessing in disguise, because that was just one less thing that One less thing I had to worry about, because obviously it's a cut. The idea is to lose weight.
Sure.
Week two, I think it was week 2 or week 3, the scale completely crapped out. So I was like, I'm not buying another scale anytime soon. So I guess we're just going to wing it from here. And it was all visual from that point. I did weigh myself once at the gym just to see which way I was trending. But at the gym, they got the doctor style scale.
Yeah.
And I've never stepped on it before. There's no, it's a bad comparison to go from a digital scale on my bathroom floor to that scale and try to compare one to the other.
Yeah. We always say the scale is a good metric and something to use, but it's only one thing, and you have to use one consistent thing. So if I go to scale 1, 2, and 3, all 3 of them, even if they're all calibrated for themselves, are probably all going to give me slightly different readings. And yeah, it is one of those things. You'll just have to go back to the reading that you had from that one time that you used it, and just hope that it's close enough to what you were at before or whatnot, and go from there. It'll be interesting to hear what that is, but as far as your body fat percentage and things like that, it's obvious you've lost body fat. So it'll be interesting to see, maybe, possibly, if you can fork over a little cash, you might be able to get a DEXA scan and see what those results look like.
Yeah, if there's a time, it's now.
Yep, absolutely.
But like, speaking of the scale breaking,
Mm-hmm.
and this is where I can relate a lot with everyone now, is excuses. I could have given myself an excuse every week not to stick to this, and as I said before, like for me, the sticking to keto part is easy. Like I don't think twice about it. I actually, previous to this, had a hard time understanding why people struggle with keto, but having gone through this experience and forcing myself to suffer a little bit, I completely understand the struggles that other people go through. Like, and I'll just go through these quickly, and we can get into them a little more if we want. But first of all, I had work travel. I could have thrown in the towel at any point. Like, oh, I got to travel for work. No chance of me hitting my macros now. But work travel, I was able to find a hotel. I was able to find an H-E-B grocery store. And I bought a couple ham steaks, bought a half dozen eggs, and I bought a stick of butter. And I stuck with my macros by sitting in my hotel room and cooking my own meals outside of the one night where I got invited to go out to dinner, in which case I just purposely underate just so that I wouldn't overeat. I was still hungry when I got back, and I'm like, at least I know I'm below my macros, which is probably a better bet than above my macros. And it was a chicken dish, and I barely ate any of it, so I know I was way below. Then week 2, I caught what I call Schrodinger's COVID. Take from that what you will. I'm not trying to go down this rabbit hole any more than we have to, and I'm not trying to say it's not real. I'm not trying to say it's not severe, depending on the individual. But I had every symptom that you could possibly think of, but I simultaneously tested negative twice when I went to go get tested. So I call it Schrodinger's COVID because I both had it and then simultaneously did not have it because I couldn't prove I had it. That was week 2. It took me out for the whole week. I still stuck to my macros, but I was in bad shape for about a day and a half, and the rest of the week I was just really off and had to sleep a lot more than I normally do. So I mean, that right there would have been the best reason of ever not to stick to it. But I stuck to the macros. I suffered my way through. I literally force-fed myself because hunger was definitely not a thing. Then the scale broke, week 3. There could have been my excuse right there. Could have thrown the towel right there. Week 4, my birthday. Could have thrown the towel right there. I just had my wisdom tooth pulled yesterday. I stuck to my macros yesterday. I stuck to my macros today. And from here forward, it's just going to get easier. So the excuses are there. The excuses are always going to be there. It's just it's a matter of sticking to your guns and really digging deep within yourself and going for what you really want as opposed to the easy way out. Because I had no shortage of easy ways out.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's pretty universal. I think that any one of us is actually going to have those types of things come at us in life if and when we have something that we're going after. When we're struggling for something, it's the inevitable thing that you will find that it is harder to do it than you thought, because adversity, it breeds further adversity on some level. And so pushing through, making it happen is all that really matters in the end. And you are doing that actively, and it's been really fascinating and awesome to get to watch that.
Yeah, and especially in the context that, real quick, just in the context that if I were to call it quits for the day or the week, I was just falling back to keto. So it's not like I was going completely off the rails. I would have still been 100% on a plan, just not the plan.
What were the non-fitness benefits of what you did? Any different mental sides of things or energy-wise? Just anything that you noticed that wasn't
There were very few actual fitness advantages to doing this. This is pure vanity. Your strength goes down, your recovery goes down. You struggle. I was a lot more tired than I normally am. So as far as performance in the gym goes, there was definitely not any advantage. I hit one PR the whole time, which is actually one I've been chasing for a while. So for me, that was the biggest one I could ever ask for. But mentally, on the other hand, and this is something I've talked about in the past too, because in case you haven't known, I'm usually a pretty big eater. I went through the bulk, stuck with the bulk through the early part of this year, then went into what I thought was maintenance. And then the lockdowns happened, so I knocked that down a little bit just because I didn't know what was going to happen. And I came to the conclusion that my hunger signals were completely out of whack. And I could literally sit down and convince myself I was hungry and then be hungry. And then 2 bites later, convince myself I was full and I'd be full. So I was eating to specifically hit a macro number, even though I wasn't sure if I was truly hungry. And I had really no way of gauging if I was truly hungry just from my really aggressive bulk cycle and coming off of that. So mentally, this was really good in the sense that I was hungry. Like, I was legitimately hungry, ravenously hungry on a few occasions. And I know what that felt like. But at the same time, when it came time to eat, I could only eat so much, which I knew in my head was adequate, but it didn't feel like it was adequate, if that makes sense. So there was a huge mental benefit for that. And that to me is worth the whole thing, because I honestly, the more I thought about it, I'm like, I was sitting down at dinner one night eating what I thought was my quote unquote maintenance macros. And I'm just staring at this plate and I'm like, oh man, I'm not even full, but I got to eat this. And then it hit me. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not even hungry. I'm not even hungry, but I got to eat this. And then that's when it hit me. I'm like, why are you going to eat it if you're not hungry? Because you think that this is the number where your maintenance is at. Clearly it's not. If I'm staring at this food and the thought of taking another bite is almost nauseating, but I'm going to keep on eating it anyways because I know I can. That's a very slippery slope. And I was right on the cusp of who knows, it could have been disastrous. I could have just wrote it out and been fine. But looking back, it's a very odd spot to find yourself in.
Very cool. Very cool. Anything else to cover before we get into the specific listener questions?
I'll just go over the program real quick. I'm sure it's in one of the questions, but we'll just go over. So obviously it's Danny Vegas Carnivore Keto Cut. So it's 100% animal based. Carbs are 5 or lower, meaning that you're going to inevitably eat some residual carbs no matter what you're eating. We all know that. The program itself is right around $40, and basically you're paying for his spreadsheet. You're paying for a bunch of literature, which is all very useful. It has meal ideas, but not a meal plan, which doesn't that big of a deal to me, because if all you're eating is animal products, it makes the eating part pretty easy. And then you're paying for his training, his training program that goes along with it. So the way I looked at it, as far as I was concerned, for the $40 that it cost, the training program alone and the workouts were probably worth the money, especially because it was something I'd never done before. That's the cut in a nutshell. It tapers you down in calories and macros over 4 weeks, like I said, and you hold 2 weeks. And then you opt in extra. I opted in a little extra for the 6-week reverse, where he'll actually structure the reverse, or you could just wing it. I opted in to go for the structured reverse just because this is the first time I've ever done it, and I didn't know what the outcome was going to be, and I wanted all my safety nets.
Yep. Very cool. So yeah, it's a great program. And if you are out there and you're hearing this and are thinking that you want to push through, get rid of the last bit of fat that you have, or just push yourself mentally, this would be a great opportunity for you. And so definitely think about that, consider it, and invest in a quality program. It doesn't have to be this one, but this one's definitely quality, and invest, and I'm sure that you'll be good. Let's talk about let's go through some of the questions here that have been asked, that are some just real basic ones. Any changes to your water intake?
Yeah, mind you, it's summertime here in Texas, and I have a pretty active job, but I believe I was drinking a lot more water than I normally do, and part of it's because I was really hungry, and you can drink all the water you want, and it'll fill up your belly for a little bit. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I do feel like I was drinking more water than I normally would. But I normally drink a lot of water this time of year, being in Texas anyway, so it's hard to gauge whether it was significantly higher or it was just the time of year.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is your normal rule of water intake? Because I know you've got a job where you're
just sweating it out to beat the band 90% of the time, and you add a fair amount of
Yeah.
salt also. I've heard different things where guys say half your body weight in pounds should be what you drink in ounces of water a day. So if you weigh 200 pounds, you should drink 100 ounces of water.
For me, I drink to thirst because, I mean, there's days where I'm driving 8 hours in an air-conditioned truck. And there's days where I'm sweating it out in a 110-degree body shop. I can tell you, logically speaking, there's 2 different water requirements for each scenario. But basically, every morning, I at this point, I almost never drink water that doesn't have salt and electrolytes in it. And for electrolytes, I use the LMNT recipe, which I just get. I get the ingredients. I don't buy the stuff because I'm cheap. I get the pink salt, the no salt, and the magnesium malate, and I make it myself. And it is in every sip of water I take. I start off the day by slamming about 20 ounces of it, and then refill it as soon as I walk into the kitchen. And then from that point forward, my stainless steel water bottle is probably about 20 to 24 ounces, and I'll drink anywhere from 3 to 10 of those a day, just depending on the activity level and on my thirst level, really. And all of them will have salt in them in some capacity. For the most part, I don't salt discriminate. If the salt's available and I can get my hands on it and put it in my water, I don't care where it comes from. I will take it and I will do it. Okay. Because and I've said this in the past too. If you find yourself not having enough salt, the side effects of that are far worse than worrying about where your salt comes from or any minuscule amount of dextrose that might be in table salt.
Yeah.
So it's just get your salt in. It's incredibly important.
Absolutely. And to that extent, I think you answered it, but electrolyte changes, just salt, element, ultima. And yeah, you kind of answered that along with that, where you make your own. I will say I have the stuff to make my own for the element. I've had the packages of element and actually use that. I personally use the Ultima more commonly because it comes in tubs and it's a little easier to scoop out a couple things of. And I like that personally a little better. And I use it not just for the electrolytes, although that's definitely a reason, but it also is a nice change up because it has some flavor to it. And so I'm able to.
Oh, it tastes great.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are all good options. Now, I would be careful with that on if you are taking in a lot of those, the amount of stevia that's in there would add up eventually. And so your total carb count would hit or be above that 5 potentially, depending on how much you have in a day. So just be aware of that. Now, Ultima it has stevia in it. And then it's in that, as far as sweeteners go, that's pretty much as natural as it gets. And so I don't bulk too much at that particular item. Now, along the same lines, the energy levels you've talked about being a little bit lower. What is a typical pre-workout regimen look like in order to get the most out of your lifting?
Oh, you guys aren't ready for this answer.
You can't handle the truth.
Oh, you're gonna love it. I was drinking protein shakes.
Oh, really?
What?
I was. Well, and here's the thing. Because I work out first thing in the morning. I literally wake up, alarm goes off about 4 o'clock in the morning. I try to hit the door by 4:30, 4:45. I'm out the door. And I'm at the gym and I'm training. Now, when I'm eating what I normally eat, which is an extremely adequate amount of food, I have never had a problem working through a workout with just coffee, salt, and a little bit of fat, whether it be olive oil or MCT oil or whatever. Never had a problem with it. But as these calories got lower, I have to admit, I do not think I would have been able to keep any kind of intensity up at the gym in that high of a deficit without having something in my stomach. And logically speaking, the one of the only things you can really consume that's going to digest fast enough to be of any benefit is whey protein. And there's no bones about it. It's just the way it is. And so I bought I think it was the ISO 100. And then I would just mix a scoop with cold coffee, slam that, and then head off to the gym. And that seemed to work pretty good for me. I didn't go in completely empty when I was really low on calories, so I don't have really anything to compare it to. But yeah, I talked to a bunch of people about it. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. It's 1 scoop a day on training days, and 100% of the rest of everything I was eating was coming from food. And under the circumstances, I really think it was a no-brainer, and I don't regret it. And if I'm still in this deficit and I'm training, I'm still going to be taking my one little scoop, and everything else will be coming from beef and eggs. But yeah, it was my pre-workout was my 20 ounces of salted water, followed by a little bit of salt and coffee with 1 scoop protein powder in it. And then I would fill up my jug again. and then hit the gym and then go through my workouts. And don't get me wrong, they were hard because I was in a caloric deficit. So that nothing came easy. So at that point, it was just any little bonus I could possibly give myself.
So on the side of trying to stay dialed in, you took advantage of using a very low carb, low whey protein isolate. In that same vein, someone else asked, what meals have been your biggest go-to meals to nail the strict macros?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's in the sense that's where the carnivore comes in easy, because basically you're just eating meat and you're manipulating around that, and then you obviously have to stick to the fattier cuts of meat because you got to get your fat in if you're gonna get anywhere near hitting that fat macro. So for me, every day was based off of a pound and a half of ground beef, and then eggs would go around that, and then whatever pork rinds to fill in, and every once in a while like anything I could find really. But every day was at bare minimum a pound of ground. And then from there, it would just be a matter of fill-ins. So I would say in order of proteins, from highest to lowest in my usage, I was very beef heavy. Next up would be pork, and then chicken, which is usually do chicken wings here on Sunday. So there was a little bit of chicken in there. And I had some tuna cans left over when I was ravenously hungry. And in my eyes, it was like, these are extremely low calorie and there's a whole can of food in here. So I did dig into a little tiny bit of tuna. And then I was actually eating very small amounts of liver. And that pretty much covered everything. I did no dairy other than butter and absolutely no sweeteners this entire time.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's great. Now, on the liver side, one question was organ meats and how do you prepare them, and how should those who've never had them start out? This is a new territory for you.
Yeah, because I don't do much organ meats. Chicken hearts, in my opinion, we've talked about on the show before, are probably the easiest to let them be your training wheels. And I found a way to make them extremely palatable, and I've literally fed them to everyone that was willing to try them, and they all agreed that that they're not bad, all things considered. But chicken hearts are cheap, so you can play with them. Some people just like to saute them up in butter. What I ended up doing, which is a little bit more on the extravagant side, is I will brine them overnight in just a saltwater solution. It'll get real tender, and then I'll rinse them. I'll wrap each one in a half a slice of bacon, and I'll just throw it on the smoker or the grill until the bacon's crispy. And it dries them out, and they lose that weird chewiness to them because of the brine and the smoke. And then basically at that point, it just tastes like you're eating a piece of bacon with a little extra meat behind it. And that to me is hands down the easiest way to start getting into organ meats and get your training wheels in. I did start playing with calf liver. At first I was trying to cook it, and it's not as bad as I remember, but it's not great. So basically what that came down to is I am now consuming about a half ounce of raw frozen calf liver every day. I mean, I got it cut up in little tiny squares and laid down in little half ounce layers on parchment paper in the deep freezer. And basically, I just pop a little one in my mouth and I knock it back with basically my morning coffee, and pop another one in my mouth, knock it back with my morning coffee. You do have to cut them pretty small because you're trying to swallow them whole. And from what I read, you want them in the freezer for at least 2 weeks before you start trying to eat them, just to make sure that you get rid of any pathogens that might be in there. Now, mind you, these I bought frozen, so there's no way to calculate how much time they were frozen before they got to you, but I still waited 2 weeks after I chopped them up before I started taking them, just because I'm trying to be 100% safe. They're a little tricky to eat that way because you're cutting them to squares and they're frozen, but it is a lot easier for me as far as flavor, as far as everything, to get them down that way. And I think I feel better. It could be 100% in my brain, but it seems to be working pretty good, and I'm going to continue doing it. If you need me to write it out for you, hit me up, and I'll definitely do that. But between those two, that'll at least get you started. We know Culinary Lion, Frank, actually has a really good beef heart recipe that I'm still dying to try. I just got to get my hands on a heart, and that'll probably be my next venture.
Very cool. You broke up a little bit in there, but I think we got the basic idea. So we'll keep going. Jim?
So with that, I'm curious, when you say the freezing kills the pathogens, normally you think that heating and cooking it does. So I've never, why does the freezing do that? Any idea?
It's just with the literature that came with the program. I don't know. I was reading a bunch of stuff on liver when I was attempting to dare this. So I might not be 100% on the source. I'm sure I can find it because I can narrow it down to either it was in the program or it was one other website I was on. And if I find it, I'll definitely post it. But they had said pretty much exactly that. You make sure it's in the deep freezer for 2 weeks so that everything that's in there is gone.
I trust
anything that might be in there is completely gone. So that's what I went with.
But it's news to me. Interesting.
And mind you, yeah, it's a half ounce, which isn't a whole lot.
Right.
But as of now, I've been doing it for a couple of weeks, and I don't think it's technically any more dangerous than the raw eggs that I've been blending in my coffee.
Fair point. So what goes in must come out. How has the gut and processing all of this impacted things?
One of our members, I won't say the last name, flat out asked, "Do you still poo?"
Yeah, so that's not an unusual question in the carnivore scene because of the 100% lack of fiber. And I'm no stranger to gut issues. So another unexpected benefit to this was it actually cleaned up a lot of the random stomach things I was dealing with. And yes, you do still poop. It's just a lot less often. But other than that, I would consider perfectly normal and healthy and no issues there. But yeah, the 100% lack of fiber, I would say there's no negative side effects to it at all.
Good.
Cool. Now, one of the questions that came up, and I know we talked about it in our group chat, was as the calories get lower, how do you deal with that? Because you're used to eating 2 or 3 good meals a day. Did you go into an intermittent fast, OMAD, smaller meals? What did you find worked best for you?
What I found worked best is at first I tried doing 3 meals, and they were just 3 smaller meals, and I was just left pretty much unsatisfied all day. And not that I could have made it work, but it just day after day, when you're on, week 2, week 3, and there's no end in sight, it doesn't seem like a sustainable plan. What I found during the week, because in the week I'm working and work keeps you busy, it makes things a lot easier 5 days a week than on the weekends. But what I found out worked pretty well for me in the week was a small breakfast, somewhere around the 500 to 700 calorie range, and then go to work. And I'd be able to, at work, it's no problem for me to work through lunch and just work all day, keep grinding. And then when I'd get home, I would be ravenously hungry, but then I would still have the back half of those macros, which would be upwards of over 1,500 calories. So then I would just be able to eat a really decent sized dinner, like a pound of ground beef, at least according to the chronometer thing that I'm using, is about, I think, 1,200 calories. A pound of ground beef, a tablespoon of butter, and about 2 or 3 eggs, that's about 1,500 calories. And that's a respectable dinner, I would say, for most people. So that, I think, was the easiest way for me to do it. A smaller, lighter breakfast, work my way through lunch, and just slam a big. I tried doing OMAD. It just, with my job, it just wasn't, I couldn't make it. The only way I would be able to pull that off is if my OMAD was for breakfast, but I don't have time for that because it takes a while to eat that many calories. And then maybe try to force myself through the day. But then I would imagine I'd be ravenously hungry at night. Whereas trying to save it for the night, by the time I got home, I was not in a good mood. I was extremely irritable, and hangry is the perfect word for it. And every little thing gets on your nerves. Bless my wife for putting up with it. And I'm assuming things didn't get too bad because she didn't check me, and she's not one to stay quiet about these things. But I know I had to catch myself a couple of times. I'm like I was saying, I take a lot of deep breaths. And in my head, I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. Like the little weird things are starting to irritate you, and they don't make sense. They're not logical. There's no reason you should get mad, but it's just the way you're reacting being under a higher stress environment than you're normally used to. And higher stress meaning you're pretty much starving yourself.
What were you? Give us an idea of some of the smaller meals. You've talked about all these different pieces, but what were you packing in your lunchbox most of the time?
Typically for breakfast, it would be like a small little chunk of protein, whatever I had left over, whether it be like a half of a burger patty or some ham steak, and then 2 to 4 eggs, whatever would add up to try to keep it as close to under 700 calories as possible. And then work completely through lunch, try to skip that altogether, and then come home for dinner. And I got a pretty good example of, actually today was actually a really good example. And mind you, I'm at my low, which is 2,180 calories with a target of 164 grams of protein and 166 grams of fat. Now, what I ate doesn't quite add up to that, but you get the idea. But I mean, mind you, this is not a bad day's eating, but under the training circumstances and under the way I train, how active my life is, it hurts. It's uncomfortable. So meal 1, which was a late breakfast, I didn't work today, had my tooth pulled yesterday, was a half ounce of the frozen calf liver, 8 ounces of ham steak, 3 eggs, and a half cup of full-fat Bulgarian yogurt. And normally I wouldn't eat the yogurt, but I'm on antibiotics right now, so I'm doing the probiotic thing and hoping for the best. So that was about 10 a.m. I didn't eat lunch at all. And then meal 2, which was this evening, was Frank, the Culinary Lion, his carnivore calzone, which, if you're not familiar with it, you haven't made it yet, you need to get on that. It's pretty much ground beef stuffed with mozzarella and pepperoni. Each one is just over 1,000 calories. So I had an entire calzone because I had the majority of my calories left for dinner. I had a cup of John Lesko's. I remember John Lesko, his chicken bone broth, which is amazing. And in that bone broth, I was still able to afford 3 tablespoons of butter and 2 blended eggs. So that actually got me to about 99% of my calories. I went over my protein by 30 grams, which obviously we all know I really don't care about. And then I was under my fat by, I think, like 6 grams. But that was today's eating, and that's not unusual to how I've been eating for the past few weeks. I tend to keep things very simple.
And so that's a great example, a great day. What has it been? Now, you've been mainly carnivore at least for quite a while. So really that part wasn't really very new to you, but we did have some questions about, so you've been on straight meat and nothing else. That type of question came up from our one-on-one group. And so talk about that mental shift, if you would, maybe of switching to a primarily meat and as opposed to everything that had been pushed on us as you need vegetables, you need fiber, you need XYZ.
Yeah, to specifically answer that question, yes, all I was eating was meat. And yes, it does sound crazy when you hear it for the first time, but the longer you stick around the keto circles, the more normal it becomes, and you realize it's not unusual at all. So that part is 100% true. That's all I was eating. Like I said before, I gave you the breakdown a little bit earlier it was definitely beef heavy, and then it scaled down from there. So the biggest shift, it's one of those things where you got to experience it, because trying to explain it to people isn't going to make any sense to them, especially if they're not even in the keto world. You talk to someone who's still on the standard American diet, and you tell them that you're eating carnivore, that you're just absolutely insane. It doesn't make sense. And you talk to half the people in the keto world and tell them that you're eating more, and 50% of them, are still going to think you're nuts. So it's safe. The more organ meats you include, the better. Hence my experimenting with calf liver. From what I understand, even if you just get a little bit of calf liver every day, it has everything you need in it in more bioavailable rations than any plant you'll ever get. And that's documented in many sources. So I'm going to just go ahead and say that's true. Mm-hmm. So it's weird. And then another mental weird shift was that my initial calorie drop was, I don't remember what it was, like a few hundred. And I was able to hit that simply by not snacking. And when I realized that was week 1, was an immediate eye-opener, because what I found myself doing was walking into the pantry, not even thinking, and grab my bag of prize. Man, I love cashews. Grab my bag of prize, and I was holding. I'm like, oh wait, not this week. So that was definitely the weirdest thing, to think that I was able to cut a few hundred calories out of my daily routine simply by stopping the snacking. That in itself was pretty eye-opening. So I mean, that if you're gonna stick to carnivore and you're gonna give this a try, that realization alone, even if you only do it for a week, you're just, okay. Mind you, yes, pork rinds are still in there. I could eat the pork rinds. There's pepperoni in the fridge. I could eat pepperoni. That's not a problem. It's still 100% on plan. But when you have that realization, it kind of opens your eyes a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. As I've been doing a carnivore month myself, I'm not cutting it all, just carnivore. I have had a few times where I see that bag of almonds and I go, I really want some almonds right now, but nope, not going to do it. I move on. I find something else, or I just try to hold off for a few minutes and see if my craving for the snack is going to pass.
Are you going to keep doing this, Berto?
Yeah, the 6-week reverse, I'm definitely going to. Actually, I'm glad you asked it. That brings up another thing I want to talk about. The 6-week reverse, I'm definitely gonna stick to carnivore. So I got at least another 6.5 weeks. And then what's starting to sound real appealing is we talked to Cody Myler, and he said he was doing carnivore 5 days a week and doing keto on weekends. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it'll be like a 5-2 split, but I do think I will allow myself a keto day or two every week, just because why not, really? I just had my birthday. We go out at our big birthday dinner. Most people on their birthdays, they go all out, and you guys are going to laugh. You want to know what my big birthday cheat meal was? My big birthday cheat meal was, we went to Liberty Barbecue. Chris is familiar with Liberty Barbecue right by his house. I had their 4-meat plate with pickles and their Cobb salad.
Yep.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, like, their Cobb salad is amazing. But yeah, I've been carnivore this long that I was legitimately craving greens, and I wanted greens. I'm like, you know what? It's my birthday. I've been saying this long. We're just going to go for it. I'm like, bring me that Cobb salad. Bring me that 4-meat plate, and I'm going to eat these pickles. And you know that I'm going to eat this. I couldn't even finish the salad. It was too much volume there.
Sure.
By the time I got done with everything else, but yeah, I mean that's what it came down to. And then every now and then, like I think last time when I did my 6-month streak, I just one day I was sitting there and I'm like, man, that salad looks really good, and so I ate the salad. So I foresee that in my future I will still be very carnivore heavy, but I'll probably just allow myself the 25 grams of total carbs once or twice a week.
Yeah, that sounds like a really great way to go. And it's harkens back to what Miles, I think, our friend Miles coined the phrase carnivore and I cheat with keto. And I think that's a good way to live in general, because that if nothing else, it keeps your carb count super low and reduces most, if not all, of the things that cause inflammation that are even keto approved. Talk about the quality of the meat that you have been eating. Now, you are lucky, and you've shared a little bit of this with me previously, and so I know how lucky you are. You have Texas Wagyu, locally grown beef as something that you go to on a regular basis. But tell us a little bit more about the aim for quality. The specific question that was asked was, are any meats good, or should you stay away from deli meats and lower quality?
I'm going to go with the standalone. Get what you can afford.
Yeah.
You know, like we just stated, I'm lucky enough to where I get locally raised beef for really cheap because I obviously I buy it by the half steer. So that's the bulk of what I eat. And honestly, that's mostly based on because that's what I have the most of. And I still go to the grocery store, and now when I go to the grocery store, I just buy what's on sale, whether it be chicken, whether it be pork, doesn't matter. But go with what you can eat. I would say, as far as the processed stuff, you can get cleaner deli meats, and if you want to be real picky, stay away from the pepperonis and the bacon only, because bacon, nothing wrong with bacon, but you get a lot of calories for not a lot of food. And when you're going to tackle something like this, you quickly realize that bacon is almost not worth it when a full pound of bacon cooks down to 5 to 6 ounces. And at my best guess, because there's no way to really calculate bacon because you don't know how much fat's burning off, you don't know how much protein's left. There's no way to really gauge it. But at my best guess, it's 200 calories a slice, or at least that's what I calculated as when I'm tracking. If you want to eat eight pieces of bacon at 200 calories a slice, then that doesn't add up to much.
Yeah, no, I can easily get a full a package of bacon, and if I let myself, I try not to, I can put that whole thing down. It doesn't take much.
And even if I think I had it wrong, even if the calculation is 100 calories a slice, still 16 slices of bacon to 1,600 calories, and that's going to boil down to 5 to 6 ounces of actual edible bacon. And then it just isn't the most efficient way to get your calories in. I should say it's a very efficient way to get your calories in. It's not a very satisfying way to get your calories in.
Yeah, and it always leaves behind a lot of fat in the tray if you're baking it.
Yeah, and there's no way to calculate that or know how much of it you actually ingested or not. And I'm not one that's going to sit there and save all my bacon fat and use it for later, or try to drink it to get my calories in. I hope nobody's really doing that. Yeah, it was one of those things that the simpler you can make it, the better. I would say if you can get your hands on some really higher quality deli meat, as long as you can be sure that it's not maple turkey or maple ham, then yeah, you should be good. And this for portability, you really can't go wrong. So definitely do that. But just aim with what you can afford and what's easier for you, and just do your best to keep it as clean as possible. You're already doing keto, so you're already taking it one step past keto.
Yeah.
So at that point, if you slip up a little bit on the meat, and it's already as clean as it's going to get. So don't fret too much about that. It's not going to make or break anything, I don't feel.
Just amazing. I'm listening to all this stuff and just taking it all in about how the human body can adapt and adjust and everything just based on the food, the nutrients that go into it. It's just crazy to me sometimes.
Yep, absolutely. I think we've covered most of the food related questions here that were asked. Let's shift gears back into kind of the workout stuff. One of the specific questions was exercise routine substitutions for those with like limited gym access or limited equipment.
Yeah, and I actually specifically heard Danny speak to this, saying that the training program he gives you is like a bonus. Any training is going to work. We all know macros are extremely powerful. Like I said, for 1 week, I was laid up feeling ill, and I didn't work out at all, but stuck to the macros 100%. And I actually messaged him saying, hey, I was sick last week. I did zero training, stuck to the macros. I go, do I repeat week 2 or do I carry on with week 3? And his response was, did you lose weight and how much did you lose? And at the time I responded, so my scale was still working at the time. And I said, yeah, I'm down. I think it was 2 or 3 pounds. And he said, move on to week 3. He's like, if you still lost a few pounds, move on to week 3. Don't sweat week 2. Just keep on going. So the macros are extremely powerful. Like I said, I specifically heard him say that his training isn't necessary as long as you are training. Any weight program will work because these macros are gonna take over more than anything. There's a lot of rowing involved, 100% more rowing than I was doing because I don't row. But this program is very rowing heavy, and then you're basically doing heavy accessory lifts outside of that. But most everything is going to be based around rowing. So I would say any lifting you're going to do is fine. Then just throw in any kind of conditioning work you feel like doing, whether it be burpees, jogging would probably be the easiest. Anything like that, and then just a little bit here and there, and then let the macros do their thing. The workouts are going to get harder because you're in a deficit. So it doesn't really matter what you do. It's still going to be really hard, and you're still going to be taxing yourself. And as long as you just keep pushing and grinding hard, I'd say it's fair to say that you're going to get the results.
So in that specific regard, have your numbers significantly decreased in the gym, or have you been surprised that they've held where they are, but maybe a little bit lower than normal? What's that been?
I stuck to his training program to the T, which is completely different than what I'm used to doing. It's not the same training that I was doing. So, previously I was training deadlifts for heavy deadlifts. I think I only had maybe 2 or 3 sessions of deadlifts this entire time. So it's hard to compare when you're training for different things. But when I did deadlift, it was excruciatingly painful and hard. And I was struggling to put up weight that I would normally not even think twice about putting up. It definitely took a hit, which is to be expected. But even in the program, I think the highest you went was, 4 sets of 1. You put a heavy weight on there, and it was, I think, a 405 rack pull. And I should be able to do a rack pull with 405 pounds any day of the week without even thinking about it. And this time, it was tough, man. The rest periods are longer. The time to hype yourself up takes longer. I was having a real hard time finding what I call my kill zone, where you're on and your vision goes blurry and you're just there grinding and grinding. Like, I was having a hard time finding that. It was getting hard. Yeah. And you just keep pushing and going for it. But definitely an overall decrease in gym performance, which is 100% to be expected. So you just got to put that aside, because if you get hung up on that, you're just going to be frustrated every day, and it's not going to work. Yeah. But in that context, it would benefit sticking to his program because it's unlike anything you've ever done and you have no baseline. So that, I think, there's probably value in that.
So one of the other questions, as we are starting to get to the end of the stack of them, is asking, would doing this cut followed by a bulking phase be beneficial for fat loss, followed by subsequent muscle gain during a bulk, and then back to this program to cut bulk cycle? How cyclical would you say that you could do this as a sustainable, that type of thing?
I would say that all depends on your timeline. Because when you read that question, it makes it sound like you're looking to, as soon as this cut ends, hop into a bulk, which I don't think is a good idea for many reasons. People that are way more educated in this stuff than I am have said it. And for example, shortly after I ended my bulk, Danny had announced he was having a carnivore cut contest where you transformation pictures and the whole bit, stick to the program, blah, 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 post your transformation at the end. And whoever he picked won a vacation. And obviously that seemed extremely appealing. And all I did was make a comment, and I'm like, cut, huh? And he immediately responded. He's like, no. He's like, pretty much what he came down to. He's like, you can't do this right now. You just came off a bulk. He's like, you can't go. He pretty much cut me off right there. So you can't go directly into a cut right off a bulk. You need to kind of hang out for a little bit, make sure everything sticks before you drop back down. And I was just like, oh, okay. I guess that's a good answer. But even he was saying, like, for me to go from that all-time high, which was 3,700 calories a day and 310 grams of fat a day, to immediately drop into this extremely drastic cut was not a good idea. So in a sense, I was happy because he could have gone the salesman route and sold me the program and just had me hop on and probably crash and burn, but he didn't. So to specifically answer that question, I think you should definitely hang out in maintenance for a while, before you transition to your next phase. Like, I am going to slowly increase my calories till I find an optimal split between how I look and how I perform, and see if I can find what a true lean bulk is, where I can gain a little tiny bit of weight very slowly over time, but still maintain the low body fat percentage. And I think there's going to be value in that before I ever try to go into a hardcore aggressive bulk. If you think of it, just my timeline, I cut last year around this time. I think it was right around October. I started my bulk. My bulk went from October to, I want to say, January. Then I rode that out for about a month and slowly started tapering back. And then I went back into my cut 5 weeks ago. And you take that, it sounds fast when you say it, but that was my whole year. One bulk cycle, one slowly taper down cycle, then an aggressive cut. And I'm going to stick with this for a while before I even think about, and I don't know if I'm going to bulk again anytime soon, but before I even think about an actual bulk, I'm going to stay here for a bit. So if you're going to stretch it out and give yourself plenty of time and maintenance in between, I don't think there's any danger in that at all. Obviously, people do it all the time, but I would definitely not recommend hopping from one back to the other and back again, because I think that would truly be unsustainable.
Yeah, it'd certainly be hard. I think I'll give Robert Sykes as an example on this. He talks about his competition prep, which is way and above more intense than the Carnivore Keto cut that you're wrapping up right now as far as the cutting portion of it. Robert was on a continual cut for 25 weeks or something. Like, it was some amazing, like, crazy number, and slowly tapering down while continuing to keep his protein about the same. And he didn't do that until he had 2 or 3 years of full-on recovery and bulking after his last competition. So there's absolutely something to be said for taking your time, being intentional, not rushing your body into these phases. The other thing that I will say, I just recently read the book by Logan Sneed, Thank You Cancer. And he talks about how he was constantly, whenever he was on the standard American diet, he was constantly on these cycles of leaning, bulking, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, trying to refine and build while not losing and all of this stuff. And he relates later on, after he went keto, he doesn't need to do that. He just stays consistent year round. And sometimes I'm sure that he varies his caloric intake a little bit one way or another. I think actually he found out at one point recently that he actually needed to eat more often and eat a higher calorie, because what he thought was maintenance was just way too low, and he wasn't seeing the gains that he should have been for the work that he was doing in the gym and things like that. It's the cycle thing on a ketogenic diet, I don't think is as important as it is whenever you're on a carb heavy diet.
Yeah, I'd have to agree.
Cool. Let's see here. You talked about supplements a little bit. You ended up doing whey powder. Mac also asked about creatine or multivitamin. You're pretty much hardcore just your electrolytes, right?
Yeah, under the circumstances, world these days, I am taking extra vitamin D and vitamin C. Mm-hmm. I'm still working, but that is 100% as precautionary and proactive, as opposed to having anything to do with this cut.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, no, I'm pretty much getting it all from food.
There was another question about collagen that we talked about a little bit before we started recording. Your take was simply, it's a good thing, so take it in if you want to. I say it's animal-based. I wouldn't necessarily see it directly connected to a cut necessarily, but increasing collagen can absolutely be a healthy thing, because a lot of collagen sources are being cut out of the food that we're eating, especially if you're using any amount of protein or processed or packaged foods as a part of your primary portion of your diet. There's a lot of things like collagen that gets lost out on that. Making a good bone broth or getting high quality bone broth is a great way to get that. Or you can get collagen peptides, make a drink out of it. It's real easy, things like that. So that's a great question there. Let's see. What was one of your grab and go things whenever you were on the road, but you needed something to eat? Or did you stay focused 100% on meal in the morning, meal in the evening?
I, for the most part, stayed completely focused on meal in the morning, meal in the evening. Luckily, I didn't have to travel for work, but 1 week when I was going through this. But had I had to, it would have been pork rinds all day.
Yeah.
You know, just because a bag of pork rinds will hold you over. It's completely animal based. It has collagen.
It's a great.
But yeah, that would have been my go-to hands down, because it on the road is probably under the circumstances, probably the cleanest thing you could find that doesn't have dairy in it, and that it'll keep you going.
Now, you mentioned, I think that's important to call out. You mentioned that a couple times where you weren't going for the cheese sticks and things like that. Danny makes he makes an encouragement in the documentation to cut back on dairy. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, which when your cheese and heavy whipping cream are typically your best friend. But I also know that dairy tends to be the biggest stalling component for a lot of people. And it isn't until they cut it out that they start seeing different results. So that was probably the biggest impact, the biggest difference that I had doing all of this was just cutting out the dairy, to go from a couple cheese sticks were my go-to almost all the time. You know, you go to a gas station, there's always cheese sticks or those little cheese sandwiches with a piece of salami in between. You know, those things are available anywhere. So to completely cut those out took a little bit of an adjustment. And again, under the circumstances, if you're only allowed X amount of calories, a cheese stick isn't very big for the amount of calories that are in it. So if you can successfully cut it out, you're going to be better off. I think I made those calzones twice this whole time. Obviously, they have cheese in it. I wasn't going to sweat it. And I think other than that, I may have had 2 or 3 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream. And then there was one night where I realized that if I added, I think, 10 grams of cheese, it perfectly nailed my macros. And 10 grams of cheese is not a lot of cheese. No, so I just threw it in there and threw it on top of my burger patty just to true up my macros, and it worked quite well. But other than that, I don't know if you would consider frozen burger patties grab and go, but I ate a ton of frozen burger patties. They're extremely easy to calculate. For the most part, you scan the barcode and everything pops up right there, and I would knock down 4 to 6 of those on my bigger dinners, and just because it was easy and you can cook them fast.
Yeah. Well, and that harkens back to the quality of what you're eating thing. Sometimes you just got to eat what you got to eat, and whenever you get home late and you just need something to eat and you need a lot of it, throwing a couple of those on the grill real quick is a great way to go. A couple minutes on each side, probably, depending on how hot you get your grill going.
Yeah, you can't go wrong. And those, again, I just go to the grocery store and I pick the cleanest ones I can find. Just definitely read the ingredients, because
fillers.
There are some out there they delivered us a package by accident, and they're not hamburgers. I think they were beef patties. There was clever marketing in the name, and I turned it around, and like the first ingredient was like beef heart, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is different. And then as you start reading it down, there's soy this and soy that and all kinds of fillers, and I'm like, you know what? I was like, I'm gonna make one and try to eat it. So like I tried to eat it, and it was terrible. It was legitimately terrible. So I tried to give it to my kids. They wouldn't eat it. I tried to give it to the dog. The dog wouldn't eat it. I'm just like, okay, I guess these are pretty much just gonna go in the garbage then.
Yep. Hate to throw something that might have nutritious value away, but yeah.
Whereas the ones that I typically go with now at HEB, you look at the bag, it says ingredients beef. That's the ones I go with.
Yep. HEB has a lot of great options that way. Oh my gosh. I thought I had some good grocery store options up in Kansas City growing up, but HEB, they're the best.
That's not an Indiana thing at all. I've never been to one of those, but I've seen you guys talk about it before.
They're a Texas thing. They're only in Texas. So one more reason for you to come down and join us.
One more. I'll add it to the list. Yes.
Yep. Add it to the list. Okay. So there's one last really important question that got thrown on there. So we've got to do this. Do your nipples?
You can ask it, Chris. I think it's appropriate.
Do your nipples glow more in pictures?
I'm looking at them right now. They glow more in person.
Would you paint them? That's a problem.
That's true. But I will comment, like, what this whole carnivore collagen higher fat has done wonders for my skin in general. And that might be more of the elimination of other things than actual carnivore itself. But yeah, there's definitely been some skin changes that I have no complaints about. And I'll leave it up to whoever asked the question to look at my nipples next time I post a picture, and they can let me know.
Yes. That's awesome. I think this has been a great thing. Jim, did you have any other questions that you wanted to dig into?
There's been all kinds of good detail and everything.
Yep, absolutely. You've had a little connection issue tonight, and back and forth as you just keep getting back on and we keep going.
I'm making it.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, that was really great, and I hope that our listeners will find that really informative and helpful, and help them go into their next step, whatever that may be, whether that be a cut, whether that may be cycling into a bulk, whatever it takes, whatever their next step, their next challenge may be. Hopefully this will help them to take that step and feel a little more confident about doing so. At this point, there's pretty much not anything else. Any other club business that we need to attend to and things like that? We hit 600 in the 101,
Yes,
Keto 101.
Yes, we did. Nice work.
Yeah.
We'll do our Welcome Wednesday post tomorrow and see if we've got any more. But yeah, if you're listening and want to check out more about keto, the Keto 101 Man's Club on Facebook for all the details.
Absolutely. Link to that is on the website, theketomansclub.com, along with all of our socials. And you yourself should go to Berto or to our Instagram and check out the physical transformation that he's been showing and all of that.
And it's not even done yet.
And it's not even done. Yeah.
I mistimed it by a week. I actually don't peak till this weekend. But now I'm on antibiotics from this tooth being pulled and painkillers and all kinds of stuff. So I have no idea what that's going to do. So at least I got the good picture in.
Yeah. Hopefully you won't see much. But yeah, that's a possibility for sure. That anytime that you introduce that type of thing, that can happen. So hopefully not. Anyway, that's pretty much it. And until next week, make sure to eat meat, lift heavy, sleep, and repeat. Thank you for joining us for the Keto Man's Club podcast. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Would you help us spread the word about the Keto Man's Club by sharing with your friends and family? We're available on all podcast platforms, so just search for Keto Man's Club and you'll find us. If you would like to connect with us, you can do so a number of ways. Our web address leads to our Facebook group, theketomansclub.com. That's TheKetoMansClub.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at Keto Man's Club Podcast. Lastly, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out via email to KetoMansClubPodcast@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to hanging out with you again next week.